a fuel system, boy. High mileage and performance, boy.
Guy Oil Super 95 gasoline gives you more reasons to drive and is available.
That the Commander-in-Chief is authorized to issue instructions to the Chief of Staff, and the Chief of Staff is authorized to issue instructions to his officers and soldiers. And that's the relationship I saw. So it kept me from thinking that there's anything political happening, that is a strict instruction coming from the Commander-in-Chief. And whenever I thought the direction that the Commander-in-Chief may have for the force, or for defense and security, that's what we look. Press a little harder in the accelerator, so to speak, because I didn't think some of the interventions would have been good for national security. So I think it's the ability of the Chief of Staff to not only interpret the Commander-in-Chief instructions, but if, as a civilian, the Commander-in-Chief may not be on the right trajectory because from his advice he's getting, then it's the wherewithal of the Chief of Staff to convince him otherwise, in the interest of the nation state, not in no personal interest. And I've had to do that when I served the Chief of Staff, and I thought I was able to do it admirably, and we had no fallout. We had no fallout, because I didn't see it as political interference. I see it as maybe an instruction that is coming that perhaps wasn't well thought out. And so I wouldn't, in all fairness though, I didn't experience political interference. I experienced sometimes some not so good instructions. Some not so good instructions, and I reacted in a professional manner. And in most cases, the administration were able to recognize that the experience I had as Chief of Staff, coming from the advice of my officers and soldiers, was sufficient enough for them to change that direction.
Okay, I know earlier you made reference to resources being pumped into the military now when compared to the 90s and the early 2000s. In 2019, there was a letter to the editor, I think, a junior staff accusing this administration of meddling in the affairs of the GDF. You would have offered an explanation just now of how it works. But based on your assessment, I know you, as a military personnel, you have persons inside the GDF still. What are their point of view? Do you see there any meddling by this administration?
Well, again,
No.
it's an interesting question, but
Yeah.
this is what I'll say to you. But I saw the letter with the junior staff,
Yeah.
and the military custom and military discipline. I find it difficult to have a junior staff writing outside of the Ghanaian Defense Force. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it might be politicking than anything else. It might be a phantom writer, so to speak. It may not be a real person who wrote that letter. And again, because of military and politics, and it would I think the letter is consistent with the trajectory of the PPP, which criticized the entrance of military officers into politics. But now we see they have found the error of their ways, because they now have a former chief of staff
As the prime
as a
minister.
prime ministerial candidate. So I think that letter was all part of the trajectory and the tactic and the strategy of the PPP to demonize the military, which was consistent with where they campaigned in the last elections when they started kicking down the doors. So I didn't give credence that was an officer or any soldier in the GDF who wrote that letter. And then when I look at the content of the letter and the level of the so-called junior officer who wrote the letter, he couldn't speak to those issues at a higher level. So I thought that someone outside of the military
Wrote it.
right, we call agent provocateur, wrote the letter to create a disturbance in the military. So that's how I looked at the letter. Having said that, it is difficult to say that the commander-in-chief is interfering with the management of the force. The commander-in-chief is authorized to give instructions to the chief of staff for the better management of the force. So once you keep it on that trajectory, I find it hard to believe that there is any interference or political meddling into the force, because politics don't deal with the forces. The commander-in-chief deals with the force through instructions. He's the chairman of the defense board. The chief of staff sits at the defense board. Decisions are made at the defense board, and the chief of staff deals with the operational day-to-day management of the force. So I would say that, based on all that I know of the GDF and all that I've been hearing, I cannot say there's political interference of the force by this administration.
And it's better resourced now?
Well, I haven't done the research. My research is between the 1990s, 2000s, and 1970s, and we were exceptionally better resourced in 70s. But based on what I'm seeing in the budget, I thought that if I was chief of staff, I'd have more resources. So there are more resources going to the GDF now than before.
I
That
think
is a
the
fact.
Chinese government would have supported as well, providing some equipment.
Yes, and that is the
vehicles and so
bilateral
on.
relation between. I went to China on 2 occasions, signed 2 bilateral arrangements. So some of those resources come from the agreements that were signed. And I went to China twice, and I signed 2 agreements with China for equipment to come to the Ghanaian Defense Force. So, and as we continue to expand, the government continues to expand its whole political and horizons. I see more resources going to the GDF, in addition to the resources that will come through from the petroleum sector.
Okay. Now, you made reference to Mr. Mark Phillips, and you said in the past the PPP openly demonized the military, demonized the process of having somebody from the military, a retired staff, enter into government or a high office. What's the strategy now? What do you make of the move naming Mark Phillips as the prime ministerial candidate? And do you think he'll be able to pull support, or a significant amount of support, from the GDF, from the joint services, or maybe across Guyana?
Well, let me first say, I think it's good in Guyana that the nation is beginning to see that there's a lot of talent in the military, and that officers and soldiers are human beings, and there's no prevention from anyone entering into a political office or seeking another type of office. So that's a good thing, and I think PPP has seen the error of its ways. The question of how effective the candidate is, the president, the prime ministerial candidate, as I said before, there's no match between the Brigadier Phillips and the president of the country. Those are they're two different leagues, because there's no match. I said it's a mismatch. I did say that. And I think that based on how you function in the force, based on how you commanded your men, based on how you resourced the GDF while you sat there, that is the extent to which when you enter into politics, you can influence the force. And in my view, I don't think that he would have that influence in the force to get anywhere close to the majority of soldiers voting for the PPP. I think the resources that went into the force under this current administration, the work that Rear Admiral Gary Best did when he was Chief of Staff, the work that Brigadier Collins did when he was Chief of Staff, and how we work for our soldiers and work for our officers is sufficient for us, the coalition, to have, I would say, more than the majority of the joint services voting in its favor.
Okay, let me take you back to 2015 when you would have endorsed the APNU ASC. Why endorse the coalition?
I felt I needed, I retired in 2013. I spent 2 years dealing with academic. I formed a think tank, Lord's think tank, and I had some youngsters and not so young people working with me. One of them was Mr. Ret'd. He was with me too. He's now with the PPP. And when I looked at the landscape of Guyana, I recognized that we didn't have, at least at the national political level, I don't think we had all the talents and all that we could have had. And I found that being a former military officer and having a lot of training under my belt, that I can use that training to develop my country. And I thought, where can I go back into public service? No, I'd served 34.5 years. So I think it might be good to join a political party. Which political party? Naturally, the PNC came, because that's the party that my family came out of. I couldn't think of joining any other political party to serve my country. The PNC then, and now the PNCR, gave me my initial break in life, gave my mother, we built self-help homes, and that's where I came from. So when you come from a background like that, you can't walk away from a party. I find it difficult when I know people, friends of mine who grew up with me in the same neighborhood. We all built self-help and went to North and went and lived. I saw some of them walk away from the PNC to other political parties. I find it hard. It's difficult for me to see how they can do that. I couldn't do that. So the natural choice to me was joining the PNC, and I was vilified by the many members of the PPP for doing that, because somehow in their mind, they felt that I was going to be available for them for services beyond the Guyana Defense Force, but that was never the case.
You said because of family reasons, because of what you grew up, you turned to the PNC. It was natural for you to do so. And I often say to people, you must not vote for a political party because my grandmother, grandfather voted for that, but based on policies.
Precisely.
So I would like to hear more about the policies to which you connected with maybe the PNC, which forms a major part of the APNU AFC coalition, the policies that caught your attention, and why not the PPP? In fact, somewhere along the line I heard that Mr. Gary Best would have been maybe a PPP candidate. Why not the PPP?
Well, names will fly around all the time, right? And I guess good names fly around in good places, so to speak. But in the context of the People's National Congress, then now People's National Congress reform, and I mentioned one, feed, clothes, and house the nation,
yes,
was a national motto. So in housing, we had self-help. If that wasn't a policy of the People's National Congress, I would not have been able to move with my mom from being a tenant into our own home.
Okay.
That's one. Two, the small man is a real man. People tend to forget that. And then President Bonham's speech at the Safari Declaration, and when he spoke about the military is not a place only for the elite, that every Guyanese must be able to serve in the military as a soldier or as an officer. If the then leader of the People's National Congress did not change the modus of entering the Guyana Defense Force at the level of officers, I would not have been able to enter the Guyana Defense Force and become an officer. So that was a policy of the People's National Congress. So that's a policy. Self-reliance was another policy of the PNC. It meant that you had to rely on yourself, with resources from state, but rely on yourself. So we started to farm our backlands, our backyards. We started to grow our own food, self-reliance. Those were policies. And of course, the political ideology of the PNC then was cooperative socialism. And I saw the co-ops being developed all across the country. So those were the policies that my family, that enabled my family, my mother, as a single parent, to raise her children and get us into schools and get us fed and get us educated. Of course, free education. I couldn't walk away from those policies at any point in time after I left the Ghanaian Defense Force.
And you believe that the AP and UAFC hold true to those very policies?
Yes, so the president of the country, now I'm talking about the president, not the commander-in-chief of the country, understands those policies very well and has reformulated those policies as policies evolve, reformulated those policies. Now we're going to a green state. And if you look within the context of the elements of the green state, you've seen everything. You've seen housing being important, education being important. Those are important pillars that are being mentioned. Infrastructure, important pillars are being mentioned. And if you link back infrastructure under the PNC, then as part of what impressed me, we talk about the Linden Highway, we talk about the bridge across the Admiral River. We were always about big projects that would build, that link the country, open up the country, and develop the country. The PNC has always been with big projects, and the coalition now, with the leadership of David Granger, is dealing with big projects.
Mm-hmm. In 2019, in October 2019, you said under the PPP, Ghana was a corrupt state. What's the basis of that statement? Tell me a bit about that.
Well, the international reports speak to that. And the corruption index, the ease of doing business in Guyana, and those came from international reports. And when we spoke about that, when I spoke about it at the PNCR press conference, it was based on facts contained in international reports, and it is based on actual evidence of people in Guyana getting business done, looking at all the projects, looking how the projects are constructed. Contracts are being signed even before the monies are allocated. I had some direct connection to that when I was developing the plan for the president on how to green Bartica. We met a man in there who had a lease for a landfill site even before the EPA has approved it, and the lease for the landfill site was right next to the airstrip. So that is evidence of a corrupt activity. So the basis of it came from international reports and national experience.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard, in fact, I was at Fogarty's once, and I heard a Rastaman complaining. He said, things real bad in Guyana before they had the drugs money. And this is what the man in the street is saying. People might say, why are you saying this? But this is what the man in the street is saying. The drugs money was flowing, and so, according to them, the economy was doing good. What's your take on that? People somehow think that it's okay once they're doing okay. That's, it's okay to circulate that kind of finance once they're doing okay.
Well, I think it's dangerous because you're saying that illegality is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Doing the illegal thing is a good thing. And I mean, I don't know the Rastaman, but I say to him, my brother, you're on the wrong trajectory. Right? What we've been able to do, the coalition has been able to, is to right the ship, so to speak, or bring the car back on the right pathway. And that takes time, and yes, the resources that may have dried up are illegal, ill-gotten money. We need a country that is balanced. We need development for all sectors in the country. We need people to be more safe in their homes, and that is what is happening now. People are safe in their homes. They see a sense of development that is broad-based and it's not asymmetrical. You can feel the development. You can feel a sense of improved wages. So for some individuals who benefited from the ill-gotten gains, they might be arguing that the country is worse. But for the average Guyanese, the country is better. For the average public servant, wages have increased. For the average Guyanese, his security has increased. He or she is safer. And if one look at the budgets, one will see where the spending is going. The biggest part of the budget, I believe, it's education. And one has begun to see the results of education. Ghana's, so to speak, education report is a very positive report, the most recent one, and that will continue to improve. So, yes, people might be saying that, but I think those are people who are directly benefiting, mm-hmm. and I don't think by any stretch of imagination we must promote illegality in any country.
And I think persons this is me offering my comment. I don't think persons understand the link or understand the reality consequences of drug money and money laundering and what the implications it would have if Guyana does not perform well in fighting money laundering come 2021 when we will undergo that mutual evaluation. It's important to not engage in money laundering, and that's from my take, because I've been following that story a whole lot.
The man in the street, not the man in the street.
Because the funds would dry up.
Yes, people who speak with illegal money do not understand what it means to the country. That it will affect our credit rating, and that's important. We'll move to close down our banks, restrict our financing, and then the same man is not going to be able to get roads, bridges, and housing.
Exactly.
So we need to get the message down into the streets for them to understand indeed. But we cannot, by any stretch of mind, promote illegality. And there seems to be a push by some people to promote illegality, left it just so to speak. We can't do that. We're determined to change it, and we've begun that change. We've begun to change it.
Oh, so we've spoken about politics, we've spoken about the military. I know you did some work in Bartica. Let's talk about some of the developments that you would have seen from 2015 to date. Some of the developments about greening Bartica, the Green State Development Strategy. How is that for you?
Well, for me, I think the president, when he spoke to the nation, he spoke about the Green State, and that's a 10-year development plan. And it's 10-year of 20 years, because the Green State Development Strategy is a 2040 plan.
Yeah.
So the president talked about the first decade. I think people tend to forget the word first, the first decade of development. Then there's the second decade, because it's going until 2040. So we've articulated Green State, going to become the Green State. That's the vision. And that means that when you think about a green state, you're talking about ensuring that within the state, the energy is clean. And once your energy is clean, your energy sources are clean, it means your products are carbon neutral. Right? And once products are carbon neutral, it means you have a higher value, higher price. You can charge a higher price for your products. And that's a very essential component of the green state, ensuring that we're using clean fuels to drive our energy. You also spoke about the petroleum state. And and I think we have to interpret that to mean that that's the revenue coming from the oil side. So, and I think the challenge that we have, and I know we can make that challenge, is to spend wisely. Is to, when we spend it, to ensure there's a laser beam on inflation, so you keep inflation down. And countries like Guyana, because of a small population and high income to come, we can reduce our national debt to zero. We don't need to go and borrow because we have money coming in. We can bring our debt down to zero, national debt down to zero, and have more resources available to develop the country. So when you look at the petroleum state, that's the income coming in from that side going into the economy. Then your education state, well, if you're not educated, you can't develop. And that's education across the board. That's not only University of Guyana. It includes technical education. It includes increasing the capacity of our national institutes, right, to even certify not only diplomas but degrees. We need technical education in the country. So when the president talks about an educated nation, he's talking about every aspect, both technical and non-technical education, using the schools in the evenings for back-to-school education. You know, there's a lot of space in schools in the evening. You bring the adults in who might have missed the bus, bring them back. We train them, we educate them, bring in the stay-at-home moms. We educate them, and we give them a skill set and then bring them into the economy. So we have to become educated. So I believe that the whole Green State Development Strategy, which is finished, and the elements of the Green State Development Strategy will drive the country for the next 20 years in the right direction. So there's a vision for Guyana. There's a vision for Guyana that is being followed by policies.
Do you think the APNU AFC government would have done enough for Guyana within the 4-year span? The vision of the decade of development when compared to what the PPP is offering. So the APNU AFC is offering a decade of development, focusing on a digital state, a petroleum state, an education state, and the PPP is offering 50,000 jobs, the Admiral Falls project, a new bridge across the Admiral River, and a few other things. What do you think? Which side is weighing? Well, I know you will say, obviously the APNU AFC.
No, well, from my perspective, right, and let's be fair, the coalition has a vision, and the PPP is visionless. There's no vision there. You have a lot of numbers being spewed of 50,000 jobs, but how? How will you get these jobs? A bridge across the Admiral River, new bridge, that's not PPP. That is what the coalition decided to do in any event. But the president spoke more than that. He said bridges across our main rivers is bridging the entire country. That's only one of several bridges. So there's no vision coming from, there's rhetoric coming from the PPP, not vision. So I know they were stumbled by the decade of development because, based on the four processes. Because the president did say that these, when you talk about the digital state, the green state, these are processes, but they're all interacting at the same time. And they're interacting at the same time to provide us with a good life. The PPP is now talking about the good life. They're now using the good life for Guyana, that catchphrase. So what they're doing, they're copying, right? And this is consistent with what we're seeing. Really, they're copying. In school, you say cogging. So they're cogging what we're doing, and that's what is happening. So and then they speak as if they have a vision. There's no vision there. So we can visualize now where the country will be in 10 years, and that is fantastic. But more importantly, we have a leader who is honest and decent. And with honesty, decency, integrity, the people of a country will benefit a lot. Versus a leader who is dishonest and without integrity. Because unless you can prove to the nation how you got your certificates, then it leaves a dent. And even people within the PPP are concerned. Because this comes back to who will be our president. You still know nobody wants to have a president with a track record where there's a dishonesty. But worse than that, how can you trust a party whose leader promotes a candidate who's dishonest? It means they're both dishonest. It means they're both of the same ilk. And that is the challenge I have.
Based on your point of view, do you think that some of the PPP supporters come March 2, 2020, when they have to go to the polls, will vote for the APNU AFC?
Yeah, I believe persons who would have traditionally voted for the PPP and looking to see Guyana go forward will cast their ballot in favor of the coalition. There will be diehard PPP who will vote for the PPP. I agree with that. But I believe there are persons who will vote for the coalition. Because when you look at it, where is Guyana going to go in the next 10 years? And they ask themselves the question, how are we now? How are we likely to be then? I think they'll come to the conclusion the better bet is to vote for the coalition, particularly with the candidate that they have. And I know the candidates, but we're dealing with politics here. And I have to say that to promote a candidate with that kind of that kind of dishonesty is a reflection of the promoter of the candidate also. And that is what I've said to my colleagues. So in the context of Guyana going forward as a nation state, I don't think the average Guyanese will want to have a presidential doesn't even want to have a presidential candidate with those credentials, much as a president.
Okay.
So honesty, decency, integrity will take the coalition forward.
Mr. Best, as we wrap up today's program, I often ask our guests to speak directly to young people. Young people, particularly those who would say, there's no need for me to vote. How important it is for every eligible, and I say eligible Guyanese because there are requirements, eligible Guyanese to vote, to go to the polls and vote, regardless who you vote for, to vote come March 2, 2020.
Well, these elections are about the future of Guyana. And I'm speaking directly to the young people, 18 to 35. No offense to those who might be 36, but I think 18 to 35 might be the youngest set of people you have in the country. These elections are about the future of Guyana. It's about your future. And if you believe, as I believe, that the best person to lead this nation is David Arthur Granger, then you have to go and cast your ballot. Don't assume that he will have enough votes to win. You have to go and cast your ballots. When you cast your ballot also, you're making a statement that you're contributing to the direction of the country. Don't be on the fence. And if you're sitting on the fence, you're not sure, let me tell you where to come. Come off the fence and vote for the coalition, because you're voting for your future. You're voting for the next 10 years. You're voting for your children, and you're voting for your children's children. You're voting for generation and intergenerational wealth, generation, intergeneration equity. Every vote counts. To all the persons who listen to the program, laying across this country, if you believe David Arthur Granger is the best person to lead this country, I ask you to go and cast your ballot in favor of the APNU AFC come March 2nd.
Okay, and if persons fail to vote, what are some of the implications?
Well, if you fail to vote, you can't complain.
Exactly.
You can't complain that you're not being served efficiently and sufficiently by the government you get. If you fail to vote, you may end up with the government you don't want to have. So go out there and cast your ballot in favor of the AP and the AFC, because it's been just 4 years, or 4 years plus. But if you look at it carefully, we have to clean up a big mess that we met. But what we've done, we've increased wages. We've made the country safer. This country was a difficult country for people to be in under the PPP. People felt unsafe. There are no more criminal gangs. There are no more extrajudicial killings. There's no more fear that you can be shot here, shot there by the state. There's no fear that the state that ought to protect you is planning to destroy you. That fear is no longer here. And that is what is important. Because we talk about agents of the state. So the country is much safer. The environment is safer. Ghana is now a country that international agencies want to do business with. Our international reputation has improved. So those are all performances that should encourage the voter out there to vote for the AP and the AFC.
Mr. Rear Admiral Best, I must say thank you so much for coming on today's program. Do join us again next time, maybe closer to the elections, to share your views. And to our viewers, thank you so much for looking at the program today. Do join us tomorrow at 12 hours for another edition. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall. Thanks again for joining us.
Fuel it up and drive, super 95. Tune up, fuel it up and drive, super 95. Tune up. Protect your fuel system, boy. High mileage and performance, boy.
Guy Oil Super 95 gasoline gives you more reasons to drive and is available at 56 service stations nationwide. For affordable price, high performance, and high mileage, choose Guy Oil's Super 95 gasoline.
Fuel it up